great day for work here at the Happy Healthy Workplace podcast. I'm Kimberly Ficklin, your host. And every week we talk to professionals just like you all around the world because we want to find out what they do to create a profitable business, the kind of business where people really want to work. Good afternoon. Happy Healthy Day. Today we are talking to Kristin Sherry. Kristin is a career consultant, international speaker, trainer, and 4-time author. She's the managing partner of YouMap LLC, which certifies aspiring coaches, recruiters, career services, and HR professionals as YouMap coaches and workshop facilitators. Kristin has been a featured career expert on Wharton Business Radio, a Disrupt HR speaker. She has contributed to Entrepreneur Magazine and has also been featured in Inc.com and Digital Business Women e-magazine. Her 4th book, Your Team Loves Mondays, right? Releases February 20, 2020. Welcome, Kristin. We're really happy to have you here today.
Thank you, Kimberly. I really think you did a great job pronouncing the title of my book.
Wonderful. That's great. Sometimes trying to get through the bio is incredible for me.
Right? I mean,
a lot of
you
words.
really got it.
It's a lot of words. Big words, but that's okay. I got it. So I'm really excited about our chat today. And we are going to be running a sweepstakes for the listeners to win a copy of one of Kristin's signed books. So stick around to the end of the show to find out how to enter. Okay, Kristin, first, let's start by talking a bit about why you developed YouMap, and then we can get into what it is and why it's a more proficient tool than other personalities and strength tests. So first, a bit about why you developed YouMap.
Yeah, so the biggest driver behind developing YouMap was the need for it. I didn't have what I needed to help my clients. I was trying a lot of different tools and there would be gaps in the information that I needed. For example, people would tell me the reasons why they were unhappy in their job, and the tools that I had available really weren't getting at that information of what they needed to be successful. And the second thing was, some of the tools were very interesting, but they really didn't tell me, so what, now what? Now what did this person do? And I kept hearing that feedback. Well, that's true of me. That's very interesting, but what do I do with this? And so I decided to create something that really gave my clients what they needed.
Okay, so what types of things were you using before that you noticed could be improved upon?
Well, that's a great question. It was interesting. I belonged to this coach group, and it was a LinkedIn group. And all the coaches kept asking, what are you using? What are you using? What tools do you use? What assessments do you use? And I went in there and looked at what people were saying, and I was trying the different tools myself. But it wasn't just an issue with the tool. It was, what should you be measuring in the first place? So some people would say, oh, I use Myers-Briggs, for example. But then you're only looking at personality. And there are other things that people need to consider when they're thinking about their gifting and what really fits them from a career point of view. So I started interviewing people and taking notes and talking to people who are happy in their careers and unfulfilled in their careers. And then I started compiling all of the data and really breaking it out into categories. What were the themes of what people were saying? And that helped me realize, okay, I need to look at people's natural gifting or their natural talent, or what people refer to as strengths. I need to look at what's important to people, what they value, their core value system, because there were a lot of people who were unhappy in their careers because their core value system was being violated in the role they were in, or by the manager they were working for, or in the workplace culture they found themselves in. And then I also noticed that there was a lot of conversation around energy and burnout, and I feel exhausted and drained. And that really connected to what they were doing every day from a skill point of view, the actual skills they were using day in and day out. And then I started to hear things about, that career doesn't really fit my personality. And so those were the 4 things: people's strengths, people's values, their skills that they enjoy using, and their personality. that's what I really needed to look at. And so instead of looking at tools and saying, okay, I'm going to plug people into these tools, I had to look at what was really the drivers of satisfaction or dissatisfaction and say, now, how can I draw that information out from people? And that's how I ended up creating YouMap, by starting with really what that person needed to be satisfied in their career, to have a career fit, and what would tell me that information. So I kind of backed into it that way.
That is brilliant. That really is a thought process that most people don't go down because we already have these tests. But I love the fact that you're saying it's more of a hyper-focused, or I guess a tunnel way of looking at things in just one, right? Like you're saying, just personalities doesn't tell us enough. Just somebody's strengths doesn't tell us enough. There's a holistic view of it, right? It's the whole person.
I love that you use that word holistic, because that's the word I always use. So the reason I started to go down this path was I noticed people would say one thing to me: the job description fit me perfectly. When I read the job description, the job was perfect for me. And then they would get into the role and it would be a disaster. So what's going on with that? If the job on paper was a perfect fit. And by the way, the same thing happens in the other direction. Employers will look at someone's resume and say, this person is exactly what they need. But Leadership IQ shows that only 19% of new hires are an unequivocal success. And half of new hires fail in the first 18 months. So there's a lot more going on here. You can't, oh, these are the skills we need. Wow, those are the skills I have and the experience I have. So what goes wrong? Because there's a lot more to fit than just the skills someone's doing. In fact, the number one reason that people don't fit a role is their temperament, which is your personality. Mm-hmm. So the personality doesn't fit the team. So you have to look at more than just skills, which is really interesting because some companies are starting to move now to including values, like what the company's values are in the job description, which is really, really important to do because millennials by 2025 will comprise 75% of the global workforce. And Gallup has done a lot of surveys with millennials and found that the number one thing they're not willing to compromise on are their values.
Wow. I mean, the statistics are pretty staggering. First of all, the 19% is wow. I had never heard that before. So that just blows my mind, honestly, because not a very high number for success. Yeah, I mean, how much money is it costing your company when your success rate is so low and your employees are turning over every 18 months on the average? That's kind of crazy. That's a lot of manpower and a lot of money, you know, in rehire and retraining. Wow. And yes, the millennials, we already know, are thinking about things differently. Now, I also have noticed, like just looking through Glassdoor and whatnot, that employers are now starting to put their values in their mission, their values, and they also are starting to say things like, well, just basically what their company culture is, you know, and they'll say like what they even offer. Like we have this environment with, you know, foosball tables and a nap room and all kinds of crazy things that a lot of really exciting companies do now. And I am noticing that they're starting to use that verbiage in speaking about their positions that are open in the company.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You have the values on the wall and then the values that are operationalized. So it's really important when you're looking into companies and looking into a values fit that you really understand the expressed values in the organization. The expressed values are really what people are living out, you know, fish rot from the head down. So if the leadership are not exhibiting those values on the executive leadership team and then propagating those down throughout the organization, your employees are going to emulate what their managers do. So if managers aren't respectful, the employees aren't necessarily going to value respect unless that's already a personal value of the person, but they will definitely contaminate down to the frontline workers. If they're not expressing the values they have on the wall, that's definitely a really important factor, that the values on the website look great, but do they live those out? And how do they ensure that new hires and people that are onboarded are fully integrated into that culture, not to create a melting pot, really just creating unity and alignment around the values of the organization so that people know this is how we behave around here.
That happens at onboarding. I love that you brought that up, because one of the things that I think it's been brought up in this podcast before that we missed the mark on is onboarding. Onboarding generally tends to mean a ton of forms that you have to fill out to get paid and blah, 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 right? And then now you're going to go over to training. And there's not a lot of this transition. There's not a lot of teaching the person or educating the person on company culture and corporate culture and the value system. And like you said, how to integrate themselves in that way. And far too often, and we say it on the podcast all the time, this is an important thing to remember. Employees emulate the leaders of the company. So if your leaders, including yourself as the CEO, if you're the CEO who's listening, if you are not living your company values and showing your employees that that's how you live, they get resentful. Employees begin to be resentful. And after a while, they just say, well, if they don't do it, then I'm not going to do it. And you have a lot of really unengaged people in the workforce, including your frontline leaders. So I think
it's interesting when you talked about forms. That's what you said. You said
right.
People consider onboarding as filling out forms. My beta reader for my new book, Your Team Loves Mondays, she wrote in the comments, wow, I thought onboarding was logistics, getting your computer, filling out your forms, getting your access set up. She thought that, and I'm not saying that as a knock on her. I think that's very common for people to think that onboarding is logistics. But really what onboarding is integration, integrating a person into that environment. And yes, you have to do logistics to get someone started, but that's the least important thing. The most important thing is that that person feels welcomed in the organization and that they can see how they fit in and how they can contribute and be successful there. Because you hear all of these initiatives to create diversity, and really you can't just end at diversity. You have to have equity. When every person starts in an organization, they feel that you are ready for them, that you're expecting them, and they feel welcomed. And it's really interesting to me when you hear stories about companies who did a push to increase diversity, and they bring on 100 people who are very diverse from their workforce. And at the end of a year, all of those people are gone.
Yeah. Because all they're looking for is diversity.
Right. But those people don't feel welcomed. It's really interesting because there's these very small ways that people feel unwelcomed. I mean, you could, for example, have a board of directors that's all men, and then you bring a woman on the board, but then all of the men only look at the other men when they're talking, and they don't look at the woman. And they don't notice anything is wrong, but she notices nobody's looking at me, so they're not really looking for my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Very small ways that we create these micro iniquities.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy there. At least we can all agree on that. One thing I think that misses the mark, or here's the thing, the one thing I think that would help in employee engagement, like that's the big thing right now. How do we engage our employees? Employee engagement is down. Well, first of all, people are confused what engagement means. And engagement really means when your employee knows what their impact on the organization is. When they know, when they come to work every day, what they do matters, and it matters, and they have to know that specific way, right? And then they start to feel like, okay, I could buy into this because I know when I come to work, then this is my impact.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting to talk to people. For my new book, I've been talking to people. I did as well. I did some research for my previous book, YouMap, as well. But it's been really interesting to talk to people around engagement because they all say the same thing. My company gives us scooters to scoot down the hallway, and we have pool tables, but like they work us to death. So I don't have time to go use the pool table.
Right.
All these things.
Yeah.
And if you ask people what they really want, they just want to feel appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to all this trouble to create these fun game rooms and fitness centers. And all people really want is to be acknowledged that their contribution matters.
There is so much truth in that. It's not even funny. We talk about workplace wellness programs and people say workplace wellness programs don't work. And I said, because you put a gym and brought a nutritionist in. And no, that doesn't engage people because they don't care about that kind of stuff. I mean, they may care, but you're not building an environment in which that's important to everyone in the company. You're just saying, oh, we're going to throw this at you because we've heard that that's what makes it better, right? Like we're going to go buy hoverboards and have foosball tables and everybody's like, great. But like you said, I don't have enough time in my day. I wonder kind of moving this back, if that creates even more anxiety in the employee. Personally, I've never been in an environment where they offered me such fun things to play with. But I wonder if every time I walk by it, I would think, wow, I'm supposed to be engaging in that in some way, yet I don't have the time to do it. And it adds in just another layer of, man, I can't get everything done at work that I need to get done. I don't know.
Imagine you did engage in those things and then you become that person. Oh, yeah. Kimberly's always on the foosball table. She's
right.
Done.
Win.
It's like that with paid time off that becomes unlimited. They find that people take less time off when you move to an unlimited paid time off policy than when you have a 4-week policy, because people feel guilty, like they're taking too much time, so they overcorrect and take too little time.
Isn't that interesting? That's great. I mean, reverse psychology, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are such interesting and diverse people in our mindsets.
Absolutely.
I know. It's just so great. Okay, so let me go back to the onboarding, Kristin. How can something like YouMap help HR and CEOs, frontline leaders, with the onboarding process? How can they use something like YouMap to help them with onboarding?
It's really interesting how you can use it throughout the whole process, actually, right from hiring. So I have the best project coordinator that works with me in the world. She is so good at her job that I have complete peace of mind. I don't even have to check in with her on things because I know she's on top of things. I have never seen her resume. Never. Because I YouMapped her and I knew exactly what I was going to get. I knew she was a disciplined person. I knew she was an accountable person. I knew she was a focused person. I knew she could build connections with our clients and customers with ease. I knew that she was a person who would do what she said she was going to do. And I knew that she was a really positive person. All of these things, I knew her temperament. I knew her strengths. I knew how she liked to spend her day. I know what her personality is. And when she showed up to work, and ever since, she's been exactly what her YouMap said she was going to be. And without a resume, imagine that. So I've had companies contact me and say, that person, their YouMap is exactly what they said they were going to be. And I can't imagine hiring someone without one now because they feel like they're hiring blind when they can't see that information about a person. So it helps right from the hiring phase to get the right person. So whether it's I'm down to two candidates and I'm not sure. The reason this is important, you can have someone that has all of the experience that you're looking for. But what you don't know are those burnout skills for that person. So one person is motivated to do those skills and another one is drained by those skills, but it's all they've ever done. They don't know that they can do something else. They've been a business analyst for 18 years. And so they keep jumping every 2 years or every 3 years to a new role because they're burned out. So they think a change will do them good. That's something you don't know as an employer. Is the person even motivated to do this job? You cannot underestimate the importance of motivation because people are a third less productive when they're not motivated. It's huge. So now you know you have the right person for the role. Now you can approach how you train that person and onboard that person based on their YouMap. So one of my clients who used it knew which skills were burnout and which skills were motivating. So they knew how to onboard and train them according to their YouMap, personalizing the approach. The hiring manager was able to do that. So you can get a sense if someone is more of a relational learner or more of a self-directed learner that, thinks and reads, takes in information. That's a really important thing to know about people so that you train them in a way that really suits how they're wired, different modalities and different approaches. And you can help career path with it. So now you know how they're wired. What are some options? Where are there opportunities in the organization? Where might your next step be? And you can plan their career path, because that's one of the 7 causes of demotivation is short-term goals with no long-term career objectives. Mm-hmm. And then you can also think of special projects that person can be involved in. So if you're spinning up project teams to accomplish certain organizational goals, having the YouMap, you'll know which of your employees are going to be more strongly oriented and therefore motivated to work on certain roles, getting the right people in the right seats on the bus. And then you can also offboard people using it. If someone was already in the organization and you didn't have the opportunity to YouMap them, and they really don't fit any of the areas of the organization where there's opportunity, you can really help your employees by giving them an offboarding that preserves your company's reputation, because you're helping them see how they're gifted, what their unique contribution really is, so that their next career move outside of your organization is going to be a better fit. And you've invested in them as a parting gift. So it really preserves the company's reputation when they have to offboard someone.
That's beautiful. I mean, really doesn't seem like the right word to use, but it really is beautiful. That's a caring and empathetic thing to give someone, even if they're not right for your organization. As you were talking, I was thinking about, a lot of times in companies, they do a lot of frontline leader shakeup, right? You take the whole, what's not working in my frontline leaders, we're having a lot of problems, and they could use this YouMap. Instead of actually getting rid of people if they had to, they could move people around to where they're better suited. But the offboarding part, I absolutely love, because I talk a lot about exit interviewing and how I basically think at this point, exit interviews are worthless because people don't use them. It's an amazing tool for your organization to understand where you're missing the mark when you're losing talented people, right? You can look back at their exit interviews, say, oh, they weren't engaged, they didn't fill their values, they didn't feel they had an impact here. And then you can begin to change company culture that way. But far too often, it's put into a file as a disgruntled employee who just didn't want to be here anyway, and there's no credence put to that. I mean, I suppose you could still do an exit interview, but giving someone their strengths as they walk out the door is such an empowering thing for someone to be able to go out and get the next job and be excited about the job that they're going to get. That's beautiful.
Yeah, a manager that's able to give feedback in a way that is compassionate, but also truthful. Candid and compassionate is really what you need to have that partnership there. And then being constructive. It's really interesting because employees rate bosses that give constructive feedback as the most competent. So it's not that people don't like getting feedback. It's they don't like being torn down by your feedback. So if you are able to give feedback in a way that people feel that you have their best interests in mind and you're truly invested in their development and they trust you, they welcome that feedback. The majority of people do, if it's delivered that way. And that's one of the things that I address quite a bit in my newest book is how managers are actually the ones that are creating that demotivated employee. They're trying to get rid of this employee because they're a problem, and they don't even realize that their management style, their delegating and directing style is what's creating their demotivated team in the first place.
That is so true. That is so true. Oh my gosh. I've said it before as well on the podcast that when I was in management, I would hear other directors complaining about their employees, and I would say, well, first of all, you're the one that hired them. So I'm just saying you're the one that hired them. And then secondly, what are you doing that's making that employee feel that way? Because I know personally in my work life that when I was, just like you said, when I was demotivated, when I was resentful of my job, when I couldn't stand it anymore and was ready to leave, was when I had a really crappy supervisor who made me feel bad all the time, even when I was doing an amazing job by the standards of the company. And I never could understand why some managers just really only know how to manage. And then there's others that really know how to lead and absolutely care about their employees and can speak to them in a way that makes them feel motivated to do things for them. And like you said, creates trust so that way, anytime that leader, that manager, supervisor, whatever comes to me and asks me for something, heck yeah, I'm going to do it because I really like the way that they treat me.
Yeah. And it's really interesting what you said about they can manage, but not lead. It's even worse than that. A lot of managers can't even manage because Gallup has shown that 1 in 10 people is naturally wired to manage people well. 1 in 10, which means 9 out of 10 of us have to learn the skills to manage people well. How do you delegate? How do you motivate? How do you give constructive feedback? How do you develop people? They don't know how to do those things. And 2/3 of people don't even get training. When you talk to people who've been promoted into management, 2/3 of them have never had any sort of management training. And when they do get the training, it's not even effective. 85% of training is scrap.
Yeah, because they're not really teaching them anything that we're talking about today. They teach them like the mechanics of the job, right? Like you said, they're getting into logistics of things again. On LinkedIn just recently, somebody posted that question. And it was really interesting, that people feel that same way. It's like, okay, so I've got this really great employee and I've got a management position open. I'm going to go ahead and give them, a promotion. But they've never been in management before. They're just really good at what they do. It's like, don't do that. You need to do some kind of testing or a YouMap or something that tells you whether this person is even suited for that promotion. Just because an employee is a good employee and does a really great job doesn't mean they're suited for management.
True. I did a survey globally for writing this book, and I asked people the question of why they became a manager. The number 1 reason was I was given the promotion. The number 2 reason, it seemed like the logical next step in my career, which that's not even looking at if you are motivated to even supervise people. I talk to so many people, like you're saying. I just talked to someone last week, aerospace engineer, who's now managing people. He is very conceptual and creative, very production oriented, loves to execute and implement. And he's doing largely interpersonal skills, managing 10 people, and administrative work, paperwork, and various admin duties. I was looking at his YouMap and thinking every single one of those 4 pillars was misaligned, all 4. And he's having some health issues as a result of this workplace situation. So we can't underestimate how important this is, because 2/3 of people will tell you they have had mental or emotional health consequences from being in the wrong fit. 6 of the top 10 causes of death in adults are stress-related illnesses. And if you look at why people go to see like the general practitioner, not specialists, but just your general doctor, 60 to 90% of those visits are for stress-related complaints. People will talk about role fit as like, oh, you know what? You have to suck it up. This is adulting. This is about getting a job and paying your bills. There are people who have that attitude. This whole follow your dreams and do what you love is nonsense. This is being an adult. Do your job, pay your bills, suck it up. There are real consequences for people ending up in bad roles, which I just said. The stress-related illnesses, the consequences this has, you spend 1/3 of your life at work. So if it's not going well there, you're going to bring it home. It's going to affect your marriage. You're going to yell at your kids. This is not just a nice to have.
No, this is a big deal. And I've mentioned before in the podcast and just very briefly that the reason why I left the corporate world was because I got sick. I have a chronic condition that was, I don't know, I always say, maybe I always had it. Maybe I had a touch of it at some point. But literally my doctor said this to me, Kimberly, you need to leave this job. The stress of it is aggravating your illness. And I have a chronic digestive problem now. that I did. Well, I mean, like I said, I don't know, maybe I always had it, but it really, really manifested itself at one of my most stressful jobs, the last one I had that I left the corporate world. And I tell people all the time, if you think that all it is you've got a headache, or maybe you can't sleep, or you wake up at 3 a.m. thinking about your job, it's far more than that. It is our bodies keep the score. Our bodies keep the score of everything, and it will manifest itself in some type of an illness, an anxiety disorder, an eating disorder. I mean, there's just so many things that I've talked to people, employees who end up, like you said, manifesting these illnesses because of stress and anxiety in the workforce.
Absolutely. This is really an epic crisis that people ignore. They keep going to that job. They keep medicating, whether it's food or even if it's Tylenol for that daily headaches you're talking about. We're medicating these problems through our relationships, through food, through other mechanisms, trying to escape. And I always say to people, problems that get ignored become bigger problems that become more expensive and take more resources to solve. And if something isn't sustainable, it will stop. So do you want it to stop because you have a nervous breakdown? Do you want it to stop because your manager realizes you're miserable and they fire you and now you're left living paycheck to paycheck with no job? Or do you want it to stop because you proactively say, this isn't sustainable, so I'm going to create a plan and I'm going to take steps every day to discover a way out of this? I always say, do you want to fall on the rock or do you want the rock to fall on you?
That is so true. And you know, when I tell people my story and tell everybody, slow down, pay attention to what I'm saying, this can happen to you. Oh, whatever, I'm good, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I say, look, I wasn't sick until the day I got sick. Like one day I was at work and I was stressed out, and the next day I had a chronic illness that, you know, and you really need to start thinking about the fact that these things do exist. Now, I was in a job where I was a rock star. I was in sales, but I personally don't think I enjoyed it myself. We talked about me doing a YouMap as well, because I'm really curious what my strengths are. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur now, so I have a lot of responsibilities that I don't particularly care for because I'd like to just be helping people in the workplace, but I run a podcast and things like that, right? So it's like, if I do a YouMap, and then I'm going to find out what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, and what I should let go of so that I can be all of who I am for everybody, my clients, the podcast listeners. You know, I just think that that is a really, really great tool for people and for corporations. I mean, we've talked about how it can affect a corporation. So I love that we talked about that, not just an individual person that could do the YouMap, but how.
Yeah, it's important for entrepreneurs too, because here's what happens. You leave this job you hate, you do your own thing. Now you have the autonomy and the freedom. And before you know it, you've turned your side hustle into your full-time job. And now it becomes a job again. It really becomes a job again. And people
so true.
Oh, you know, you're always going to have to do things you don't like to do. And that is true to some extent. To some extent, I was in Dubai at the Emirates Lit Fest. I went there to speak and do a book signing, and I met a coach when I was there and had dinner with her. And she said to me, I really don't like doing this, that, and the other. And I'm like, why are you doing it then? And she said, because I have to. And I said, no, you don't. And she said, well, I'm really nervous to hire someone because I don't know if I could keep them on. And I said to her, look, you could hire a virtual assistant from the Philippines. They speak English as their first language. They're born speaking English, like they're taught English right from the start. They have excellent English, but you can pay them $8 an hour. If you have 3 hours of administrative things you're doing a week that you hate, are you telling me that's not worth $24 to you? You probably spend more on silly things in a week than something like doing parts of your role that you hate. So it's about priorities. And she did it. She immediately hired someone and is no longer doing those things. I practice what I preach. I do not do things that I hate doing. When clients come to me and ask for services that I don't want to do, I refer them to someone else. I don't have this fear-based reaction that says, I need to take every bit of work that I get so that I can pay my bills. No, because it affects my performance when I do things I don't enjoy doing. It causes me to procrastinate. You always know what you don't like doing because you're procrastinating doing it. And it frees me up to do more of what I like, which creates more positive referrals because you're really good at things that you enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And all around, it just brings more abundance of those types of things that you want to do. You attract more of what you want, because if you're accepting jobs you hate, those people are going to go out and refer more of that work to you.
More of the jobs you hate. That's true.
Yes.
I know.
Yes. And
yeah, I've said no many times and, just been like, yeah, I don't even do that anymore. Some incarnations of my business. I started here and now I'm here, and I'll say, yeah, no, I don't really do that anymore. But I do know somebody who does. It's actually really nice to be able to have that clarity in your business and be able to say no to things, like you said, not just be chasing money because you need money.
Well, I aligned my YouMap. I looked at my YouMap and I thought, how do I like to spend my time? And I created 4 buckets of things that I'm willing to do. And if it's not in those 4 buckets, I say no to it.
That is brilliant. I love it. So here we are at the end of the podcast. Kristin, this has been wonderful as usual. I know we could talk forever and ever about this. Super fun. I think we got a lot of really good key points in here. But in closing, is there anything that you think needed to be said that we didn't say today?
You asked me a question that I didn't fully answer because we got so excited about the onboarding. You had asked me why YouMap over some of the other tools.
Yes.
And I will just tell you from the voices of people using it, not what I think, but the coaches, the HR people, and the individuals who are using it have said there are 3 things that make it different. That it's holistic. It looks at the whole person. That it is intuitive. You can look at it and understand it immediately. And it's actionable. You can look at the information about you and immediately know what you need to do about it. And that's one of the things that people have complained about is, this is interesting, but so what? What do I do with this? That's great that I'm a red or I'm a blue, but what do I do with that?
Right. How do I put that in practical application in my day?
And the other thing I would add is just really understand that you are a unique person. If you look at the data, you really are a one in infinity person. So there is value that you can add that other people can't. And if you go around with blinders on and don't know what your unique contribution is, you're really limiting your ability to have an impact in the world. So even if you just want to purchase the book, the YouMap book, and don't forget to win it too, right? Because you're going to give that away.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we are. Yeah, that's good. I love that in closing. We are our own unique selves. And as organizations, as business owners, if we can look at our employees and realize that everyone's unique and has their own contribution, their own impact, and the way that they want to show up in the world, and then be empathetic and allow them the space to do so. Use a really good tool like YouMap that helps you to understand your employees. I think it's really important. So again, thank you so much, Kristin, because this was a great conversation. But for the listeners, like I mentioned at the top of the podcast, we are going to give away one of Kristin's books. So you can go to thehappyhealthyworkplace.com/YouMap. All of the links that we talked about today in the show will be in the show notes. The link for the sweepstakes will only be available for 7 days, so be sure to enter. And if you love what you hear on the podcast, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast player. This is the close of the Happy Healthy Workplace podcast. Have a happy, healthy day. That's a wrap for today. The Happy Healthy Workplace podcast is now complete. Be sure to subscribe and join us weekly for secrets, solutions, or strategies that help you create a profitable business where people really want to work. This is Kimberly Ficklin, wishing you a happy, healthy day.